Hey YouTube, and welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to go over a topic you've probably heard me talk about before, and that is aim. As many of you probably know, the most viewed video on my channel, and the video that really helped me take off, was a guide to aiming on PC I made last summer. Considering it's been a year since I made that video, and a lot has changed from Season 5 to Season 10 in Fortnite, I figured it's about time I give you guys an updated guide. So today, I'm going to talk about everything you need to know to improve your aim in Season 10. Just as a warning, this video is going to be much longer than my normal ones because there's a lot of stuff I want to cover. First, I'll go over settings and sensitivity. Then, I'll talk about aiming tips related to your setup and peripherals. Then, I'll move on to in-game tips specific to all the major guns. And lastly, I'll touch on what I like to do to practice and improve my aim. Like I said before, this video is going to be longer than usual, so if you've seen a lot of my other videos, feel free to jump past sections of the video you've already heard me talk about, like settings and sensitivity. But if you're new to the channel, or you just want to see an updated version of all those things, then I'd recommend you watch it straight through. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's get started. Like I said, the first thing I want to go over in this video is settings and sensitivity. Now, there are two reasons I like to start with settings in these kinds of videos. The first reason I like to start with settings is because they are the easiest thing to fix. Sometimes what gets in the way of you having good aim might just be playing with a bad configuration or having a couple of the wrong boxes checked in your settings. So if you take a look at those things and realize something's off, improving your aim can be as simple as unchecking a box. Another reason I like to touch on settings and sensitivity in specific is because they are really the foundation for all the other tips. You can know everything about the bloom on a certain gun, but if you're playing with a terrible sensitivity or you have really bad settings, you're going to be making aiming way harder than it has to be. So to get started, let's look at some important settings. Now, there's really only one setting I want to touch on that's outside of Fortnite, and that is mouse acceleration. Now, I'm guessing most of you already know about this setting, but I can't make an aim video without it because it's really important that you have the setting turned off. Basically, for those of you who don't know, what mouse acceleration does is it will increase your sensitivity based on how quickly you move your mouse, which is going to mess with your muscle memory when you're flicking the mouse quickly. So to turn it off, it's actually really simple. All you want to do is search up mouse settings on your desktop, then select the first option, and go to the top right where you see additional mouse settings. Click on that, then go to pointer options and make sure enhanced pointer precision is disabled. Once you've got that setting right, then we can move on to in-game settings. With the in-game settings, there are two things we're trying to do. First, we want to fix any settings that interfere with aiming, and second, we want to get the game to run as fast and as smooth as possible. In this video, to save time, I'm just going to touch on the settings that might interfere with your aim. If you want to improve your FPS and game speed, I have a whole video dedicated to that, which I'll throw on screen right now, and you can find it in the description as well. Alright, just starting from the top, the first setting that might interfere with your aim is the screen mode. Generally, you're going to want to be on full screen mode. For whatever reason, I know that for me and a lot of other people as well, when you play without full screen, there's often a pretty noticeable input delay, which means when you move the mouse, the game doesn't register the movement until a little later. This is a big problem because it will make all your mouse movements slower and really mess with your aim. Now, I will say that I've heard some people say it helps their FPS to play on windowed full screen, so what I would do is try to play on full screen first, and then if that doesn't work, you can use windowed full screen as sort of a backup option. Moving down the settings, I want to quickly talk about resolution as well. Now, normally the setting won't affect your aiming at all because it just controls how precise looking the image on your screen will be. The only thing I want to say though is that if you have a cheaper PC and you're lowering your resolution to increase FPS, you should be mindful that the lower you move that resolution, the blurrier the image is going to get on the screen, which is going to make it harder for your eyes to separate opponents from the surrounding environment, especially at long distances. This is the same reason I recommend turning all the graphics settings to low, because the more lighting and the more effects you have, you're going to kind of blur your enemies and make them harder to see. And being able to see your enemies is definitely a big part of aiming. So if it's not a big deal to you, lower your graphics and keep your resolution as high as you can. The only other big setting I want to mention is VSync. How the setting works varies a lot from setup to setup. Personally, I have never found VSync helps me. All it's supposed to do is cap the in-game frame rate to your monitor's max frame rate, but for me, all it does is make my game laggy and create a lot of input lag. So I would check to see how the setting affects your PC, but don't feel like you have to use it. The last small setting you should check on is motion blur. There's not much to say with this setting, other than that it's going to make effects on your screen more blurry, which of course is not any good for your aim, so definitely turn it off. Alright, now that I've gotten through settings, I want to quickly talk about sensitivity. Like with settings, there's so much to talk about with sensitivity that there's no way I could cover everything and keep this video short for you guys. So what I'm going to do here is give you guys a condensed version of another video I made that goes way more into depth with sensitivity. So if you want a more complete sensitivity guide, then go look at that. But for the sake of time, here are the big things to know about sensitivity. Okay, so there are two components to your sensitivity. Your in-game sensitivity, and then whatever you set your mouse sensitivity equal to, which is called the DPI. If you multiply these two together, you get your effective DPI, or eDPI. For reference, I run on 500 DPI and 0.141 in-game sense, which comes out to an eDPI of about 70. This is actually pretty high on the spectrum of eDPIs, and if you're still unsure about what you want your sensitivity to be, I would start much lower, like around 30 or 40 even, but you can work up from there. With sensitivity, at least in Fortnite, I'm of the opinion that you want to go as low as you can while still being able to build and do everything else. I talk about this more in my other video, but for the time being, just know it is much easier to work from a low sensitivity upwards than a high sensitivity down. So if you're having trouble with your tracking, or you just think your sensitivity is off, try lowering it and then work up from there. The only other thing I want to say about sensitivity is it's all about consistency. Sensitivity is very personal and subjective, so don't expect to just copy my sensitivity or pros and have really good aim all of a sudden. Instead, you have to practice and stick with the sensitivity until you decide there is specifically something wrong with it. Only change it if you are sure that it is too high or low, otherwise you might fall into the trap of constantly changing your sensitivity, and that will completely throw off your muscle memory. If you want more sensitivity tips, definitely go check out that other video in the description below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave sensitivity here and move on to tips for your real life setup. When it comes to setup, this is another thing that will vary from player to player, but I'd like to offer a few guiding tips that I've noticed have helped me. Okay, so the first tip for your setup is to try to get a really large mouse pad. Having a larger mouse pad will give you more room to move your mouse without picking it up, which is obviously a plus, but more importantly, the bigger your mouse pad is, the more you will be able to lower your sensitivity. Having a super low sensitivity with a big mouse pad is nice because it means you'll be able to cover all angles around you in-game while still reaping all the benefits of having that low sensitivity, like increased tracking accuracy and precision. So give large mouse pads a try and see if they help you with your aim at all. The next thing I'd like to talk about is your mouse. First and foremost here, I just want to make it clear that when it comes to aiming, it does not matter whether you have a wired or wireless mouse. When I made this guide last year, a lot of people asked me if it was okay to use wireless mouses, and other people commented responding to them saying that you have to use wired, that it's faster, that you're putting yourself at a disadvantage if you don't, but the reality is that's just not true. If you want proof, I'll link some videos below explaining the difference between wired and wireless mice, but basically all you need to know is that so long as you're buying a decent name brand gaming mouse like Razer, Logitech, SteelSeries, or other brands of that sort, wireless mouses with current technology are just as fast as wired. Now, even lesser known brands still make fine mice. I'm not saying you can only buy mice from expensive brands like Razer, Logitech, or whatever. It's fine to get other ones so long as you do your research, find something you're comfortable with, and you know that it's a solid mouse. Usually anything except the default Windows mouse will get you by, but just do your research and make sure that whatever mouse you have is decent quality and has a good tracker. Another tip for your setup that has nothing to do with your actual equipment that I want to talk about has to do with the way you position your keyboard and mouse. Now, I might make a whole video on this because some of the new setup styles we're seeing on PC are kind of crazy and it's a little weird to see, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to talk about the way your mouse hand is positioned. Now, I mentioned this in my last guide, but the only thing really consistent about all the pro setups with their mouse is that they make sure to support their arms above their desk level or wherever their mouse is sitting. Just from personal experience, I can say it's much easier to aim if your elbow is sort of propped up at a certain height. That way, all you have to do is worry about sliding your arm, and aiming will actually be much more controlled. So if you aren't already doing this with your setup, try to keep your arm elevated up above your mouse. Alright, now that we've made it through the boring tips outside of the game, let's talk about some in-game tips related to specific guns. In this video, I just wanted to touch on the main guns that are relevant in Season 10, so that is going to be your ARs, your SMGs, and the shotguns. For ARs, we'll start with the heavy AR and infantry rifle because those are pretty simple and quick guns to go over. With these weapons, you want to use them from mid to long range, as you probably know. So with these guns, there's not much advice I can give other than literally just find some cover, crouch, aim down the sight, and slowly tap your shots. The bloom on most of these guns, except for the gold infantry rifle, is pretty bad, so you almost never want to shoot multiple shots back to back to back, unless you have one of those higher rarity infantry rifles where you can kind of get away with just spamming shots. No matter which rarity of these guns you have though, you shouldn't even try shooting them without aiming down sights because the spread in bloom is way too big to reliably hit anything. For the normal AR, things are a little more complicated. Personally, I prefer this gun. I think it is much more beginner friendly. Now like the other ARs, you almost never want to shoot without ADSing. The only exception with this gun is it's sometimes okay to spray without ADSing if you are in really close quarters, like in the same room of a house or the same box. Whenever you are aiming down sights with the AR though, you should definitely crouch to reduce the bloom of the gun. Now, one more thing you might not know is that depending on the rarity of the AR you have, the bloom is actually much different. So with the gray AR, spraying without any pause doesn't really work for that long, but with the gold AR, it is much easier to spray for extended periods of time and still hit your shots. So just keep that in mind when using different rarity ARs, so you know what to do with them. Alright, now on to SMGs. With the SMGs, we have the burst and the silenced SMG. If you're unlucky enough to get stuck with the burst SMG, there are a few tips I have that can help. The first thing about the burst SMG is that as the 3 shots go off, you should know that the spray moves upward as well. So when you're aiming with the burst, try to hit your opponent right in the center of their character model at about knee level. That way each shot will hopefully hit, and your last shot will hit them in the head. Now none of this is perfectly reliable, the spray can be a little weird sometimes, but that will give you a better chance at hitting all 3 shots. Another thing about the burst SMG is it's surprisingly accurate without aiming down sights. So you don't have to be that close, and you can still land your shots without ADSing. Speaking of not having to aim down sights, that leads me to the silenced SMG. The only thing I have to say about this gun is it is crazy accurate without ADSing. Even at mid-range, you can shoot this gun without ADS and land a lot of your shots. The only time you really have to aim down sights with this gun is if your opponent doesn't see you and you want to make sure you land all of your shots. Otherwise, just W key, spray, and this gun will do the rest. The last gun type I want to talk about is shotguns. Shotguns are a whole different type of aiming compared to the other guns in Fortnite, so they're something you definitely have to get used to, and it's also important to understand the bloom, especially for these guns. We'll start off with the drum shotgun because this gun is the easiest to go over. There's not much to say about this gun because really all it's good for is W keying, spraying, and praying. To be honest, unless you're stuck with it, I wouldn't even bother picking up this gun. Hopefully it will be out of Fortnite in a couple batches. Alright, now on to the real shotguns you might actually want to use. With these, we have the tac, the pump, and the combat. When it comes to your aiming style, the tac and the pump are actually very similar. Both of these guns aren't super accurate, so if you can, you almost always want to be crouching when you shoot these. If you can't crouch, you want to at least be aiming down sights with these guns, because if you don't, especially with the tac, the pellets are going to go all over the place. The only time where I don't aim down sights with these guns is if I am literally face to face with the opponent. Otherwise, definitely try your best to ADS. Since the pump and even the tac don't shoot very quickly, the most helpful tip I can give with these guns is take your time when lining up your shots. It is much better to take that extra second and hit a shot for 100 damage than it is to panic, flick, and hit somebody for 40. So if you notice your aim is usually good with most guns, but you struggle with the pump or the tac, try to slow things down a little. So to recap, with the tac and the pump, you need to take your time, crouch your ADS if you can, and line up your shots. As you practice more and more, everything will start to get faster, but if you are just starting out, take things slow and you'll get much better results. Alright, the last gun I want to talk about is the combat shotgun. What makes this gun so powerful is its accuracy and its fire rate. When you're using this gun, basically all the other rules that you follow with attack and pump go out of the window. Of course, if you have the time, you want to crouch and line up your shot, but with this gun, don't be scared to jump around in fights and just hip fire, because even without ADSing, the spread on this gun is really small. This gun takes a lot more precision if you want to use it to its maximum potential, but since the gun also fires so fast, you can get away with just spamming shots and you'll probably win most fights. If you can't tell, I really like this gun and highly recommend picking it up. Really, there's no wrong way to use this gun. Okay, last but definitely not least, let's cover practice. Of all the things I talked about in this video, practice might be the most important part of improving your aim. Just like with the sport, you can know what to do, but actually doing it is a whole different story. With aim, especially in the heat of the moment, a lot of it is going to come down to muscle memory. So it's really important that you spend the time building that muscle memory outside of actual matches. In my opinion, I think the best way to improve your aim in Fortnite is by actually practicing in Fortnite. I know a lot of people recommend external aim trainers like Kovacs, and those work fine, but for me, I think it's better to practice aiming on creative maps, because then not only do you get to practice aiming, but you're actually getting used to the gun mechanics as well. As you all know, I'm a big It's Jarian fan, and in one of his videos a few weeks ago, he showcased a map made by a guy named Teadoh. I could make a whole video on this map too, but for this video we're going to just try to focus on two big parts of the map that can help you improve with both kinds of your aim, your tracking and then your flicks. I'll put the map code in the description so you guys can use it too, but for the past couple weeks I've been using this map to warm up, and I can say from personal experience that it is really useful. For tracking, I recommend going over to this sort of bounce pad arena he has set up that spawns zombies. You can use an SMG or an AR for this drill, but really all you want to do is track the zombies as they bounce around. What's really nice about this drill is after you do it for a while, you'll start to get an idea of your weaknesses and strengths when it comes to tracking. For me, I know I am much more comfortable tracking to the left than to the right, so that is something I've been working on. While you're doing this drill, you might notice your aim isn't very fluid and smooth, which could mean that you need to drop your sensitivity to help you improve your tracking. No matter your aiming skill, definitely check out this drill because it's really helpful and it's a great way to warm up before you play. The other drill that I'd recommend for your flick aim is this target room Teadoh has set up right by the bounce pad arena. With this drill, you'll want to take a shotgun or an infantry rifle even, and just practice flicking your mouse over the targets and shooting quickly. This drill isn't about as much as if you can hit the shots, as it is how fast you can hit the shots. Remember that with flick aim, it's all about developing that muscle memory and getting a feel for how far you need to move your mouse to move a certain distance on the screen. So practice flicking quickly and see how fast you can flick while still hitting your shots. Just like with the tracking drill, also be mindful of your strengths and weaknesses. If you notice you're much more comfortable flicking one way than the other, then make sure you work on that weak spot. One last thing I'd like to mention about this map is there's this section in the back that kind of combines tracking and flick aim. It's not as good as the individual parts, but if you're just in a time crunch and you want to warm up quickly, you can run to the back here and use this as your kind of warm up for both of those. There are of course more things you can do to work on your aim besides what I just showed you, but if you just practice these two drills for 5 or 10 minutes a day, I guarantee you'll see improvements. Other than that, guys, that is all I have for practice, and that is about it for this video. With all my aiming videos though, one last thing I like to say at the end is to remember to stay calm while you're aiming. Aiming is supposed to be a very smooth motion, so while you're playing, do your best to stay calm and keep a level head. To be honest, that's one of my biggest problems, and just practice flicking your mouse over the targets and shooting quickly. This drill isn't about as much as if you can hit the shots, as it is how fast you can hit the shots. Remember that with flick aim, it's all about developing that muscle memory and getting a feel for how far you need to move your mouse to move a certain distance on the screen. So practice flicking quickly and see how fast you can flick while still hitting your shots. Just like with the tracking drill, also be mindful of your strengths and weaknesses. If you notice you're much more comfortable clicking one way than the other, then make sure you work on that weak spot. One last thing I'd like to mention about this map is there's this section in the back that kind of combines tracking and flick aim. It's not as good as the individual parts, but if you're just in a time crunch and you want to warm up quickly, you can run to the back here and use this as your kind of warm up for both of those. There are of course more things you can do to work on your aim besides what I just showed you, but if you just practice these 2 drills for 5 or 10 minutes a day, I guarantee you'll see improvements. Other than that, guys, that is all I have for practice, and that is about it for this video. With all my aiming videos though, one last thing I like to say at the